We're getting closer and closer to kickoff. It's literally 2 days away by the time you hear this. Let's look at FAMU's ceiling, floor, and Gerald Thomas's prediction for what he thinks they'll actually be. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one. Daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Use the promo Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Norfolk State. Yes, one half of the MEAC SWAC Challenge is the pressure on Dawson Odums. It's a completely different side of this conversation that we had, I think maybe a week and a half ago. Prior to that, we'll take a look at the HBCU players on the Senior Bowl watch list. There are 11 of them, and 8 of them come from Gerald Huggins' top 10 prospect list. I told you my guy knows what he's talking about. But we kick it off with FAMU ceiling, their floor, and the prediction of what they will actually be via Gerald Thomas. Right now, did y'all hear the power on the Play My Music in the intro? Did you hear the power behind the Play My Music in the intro? I felt it. I ain't hear it, obviously, because, I'm talking to you right now. But, I heard it. I felt it. Woo! Football season is back. It bring out a different side of me. But Gerald Thomas, he does phenomenal work with the Tallahassee Democrat. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. We've had him on the show one time before. When I tell you this guy is so knowledgeable, such an inside guy for FAMU. And if you want an expert on it, that's the person that I would point you to. He does phenomenal work. I want to use his article as a basis for this segment because I think it's really interesting. With him being such an insider, with him having such a close relation and proximity to the school and to the program, the exercise of floor versus ceiling and then the middle of what we think they'll actually be is fascinating to me. I really do think that it's interesting. So let's get into what his prediction for FAMU is going to be. He predicts that FAMU goes 9-3 this year. With the entire world, when the entire Black college football world looking at FAMU, a 9-3 season will be absolutely exceptional. If FAMU can find a way to go 9-3 in this upcoming season, I would consider that a win. What's interesting to me is the way that they got to 9-3. The way that the Rattlers got to 9-3 in Gerald's predictions is they lose to Jackson State. It's the only SWAC game that they lose, and it's the only FCS game that they lose. Now, that's very interesting. I think that saying Gerald and it not being Huggins, really, really weird, as much as we referenced G on the show. But GT, let's try it. But when you see how GT thinks that this is going to go, you're looking at losing to Miami and Troy, the FBS opponents on the schedule. You're not losing to anyone else other than Jackson State. Now, where it gets tricky is 9-3 will be a great record for them, no matter what. But is it good enough to make the SWAC championship if you lose to Jackson State? That'll be interesting because now they have to lose 2 times. Jackson State now has to lose to 2 other people in this conference. And if they don't, you'll be in a situation you were in 2021 and 2022, where you were the second best team. You just couldn't beat Jackson State. That would be just the idea of them losing to the Tigers and then having to sit around and wonder what else is going to happen, because Jackson State could easily lose 2 games. That could easily happen, right? Like, I don't think that's unrealistic. So if I was FAMU though, and they say, hey, you're going to lose to Miami and Troy, you'd be like, okay, whatever, I get it. You're also going to lose a SWAC game. This is not the one you want to pick. This or Alabama State. Now, obviously, we're giving GT's breakdown, but this is my show, so I have to give you something else and attach. I have to give you my side of it and how I feel about it. Otherwise, you could just go read his article, which you should still do, because I'm not going to give you every single detail of it. I would lose to somebody like PV. It's not a home game. They're on the West. So it's just not as much of a fight. Now you look at the best case scenario. It's not hard to imagine what the best case scenario is. If the prediction is you only lose 1 game in the SWAC, the best case scenario is you lose no games in the SWAC. You still do lose to Miami and Troy. That is still in his best case scenario, is that you're unable to win a Power 5 game, or a FBS game, I should say. So this one is simple. Whatever, we can push that one to the side. Now you look at the worst case scenario. The worst case is when it gets interesting again. If losing to Jackson State and your prediction is the most intriguing thing on this article, I think who he believes they could lose to is a very close second. Who he believes they could lose to is Alabama State, Jackson State, and Southern. What he says is the worst case scenario is going 8-4 on the season and going 6-2 in conference play. So you still have the Miami and Troy loss. There's no world in which GTC's, I'm just going to say Gerald Thomas. GT doesn't feel right. There's no world in which Gerald Thomas sees you losing to a MEAC opponent. You open up with Norfolk State and South Carolina State. He does not think that FAMU loses these games at all. There's only 3 games that are really in contention. You're losing to Miami and Troy, period. You're beating the MEAC teams, period. Now it's between Alabama State, Southern, and Jackson State on, are you able to come down with those games? And in the worst case, he believes that you lose 2 of the 3. He thinks the best case is that, the most likely case is that you lose to Alabama State and Jackson State. I'm here to tell you that's the last thing that you should ever want to happen as a FAMU fan. If you're looking at the SWAC East, to me, the SWAC East is a 3-team race until somebody else proves that they deserve to be in this conversation. It is Jackson State, FAMU, and Alabama State. If any of those 3 lose to the other 2, you're gone. If any of those 3 beat the other 2, that's the champ. And I know it sounds so simple, but if we're speaking about the best case and worst case scenarios, and the worst case is that you lose 2 games, and we're thinking that in this worst case scenario, the most likely way to get here, the most likely route to the worst case, is to lose to Bama State and to lose to Jackson State. I think you can wrap up the idea of winning the SWAC East. I think that's done, right? So the worst case is that you're still a pretty good team. You're just not a SWAC East champion. But when you're just looking at how he looks at them, between 1 to 2 0 to 2 losses, 0 to 2 losses, I should say. 0, best case. 1, most likely. 2, worst case. That's a really good season to me. But they're standards. I'll tell you, one of my takeaways is that this just feels like Jackson State from a year ago. I try to erode that from my memory. Because in a way, I think it's too easy of a comparison. I think it's just too easy of a comparison. But at the same time, some things don't have to be difficult. Some things don't have to be complex. You lose a lot of the same pieces. You lose you lose pieces on your team. You lose a head coach. People are all looking to see what you're going to be after the last couple of years of really strong play, arguably dominance on both sides. I still think that FAMU was dominant. They just didn't beat that one team, but they were dominating people. It's just so many parallels. And then when you get to the best case and worst case scenarios, and most likely, I would say that if you ask somebody from Jackson State's fan base or somebody who was writing about Jackson State, you go ask somebody at Tiger Talk, go ask the 1400 Club. I can guarantee you that this is kind of what it looked like. Best case scenario, we don't miss a beat. We go straight undefeated again through the conference. Worst case scenario, we lose a couple of games. Most likely scenario, somebody gets us. And you know what? They probably would have picked FAMU. Funny enough, they maybe not pride-wise, but like that's probably the team that you would point to be honest. It's just so many parallels. And then I'll say this, my second biggest takeaway is when looking at the schedule, because the reason that Gerald Thomas believes that FAMU is most likely in his worst case scenario to lose to Alabama State and to lose to Jackson State is because those are both road games. One of my biggest takeaways is FAMU has a phenomenal home field advantage. They do not lose on their home turf. That just doesn't happen. But unfortunately for them, they have to face Alabama State and Jackson State away from their home turf. So as good as the home field advantage is for FAMU, arguably one of their biggest advantages is taken away in the two biggest games of the season. You have to go to Bragg. You got to go to Montgomery. Like you got to go to these stadiums and they don't come to you. So that'll be very interesting. I think that the battle for the top of the SWAC East is going to be just as entertaining as the battle for the SWAC West. But I could argue that the SWAC East is going to have the better teams. I really do. I think that FAMU is going to be a solid team. I think that Alabama State is going to be really good. And I think that Jackson State's going to be a really solid team too. I can't wait. Obviously, we know where I'm favorited. I'm kind of leaning to that way. But who knows? After this game here, maybe I'll feel differently about FAMU. I'll say this. Give me about 2 to 3 weeks with FAMU. Once we get into the conference season, I may feel differently. Because literally all I'm waiting on is for you to show me something. I just need to see something. I need to get something that I can digest. And once I'm able to digest it, then I'll be able to say what I think about the team. But as of right now, I'm just trusting in the recruiting ability. I'm the type of guy I need to see it on film. I need to see it on tape before I just come out and be confident about it. So we'll see. But those are my observations. Best case scenario, FAMU goes undefeated in conference play. Worst case scenario, FAMU drops a couple of conference play games. And then the most likely scenario, according to Gerald Thomas, is that they lose one game. But if it's the Jackson State, oof, we got a real interesting situation. Speaking of interesting situation, let's go through some of the players who made the Senior Bowl watch list. We have 11 HBCU athletes, and a lot of them, the lump sum, the majority of them come from our HBCU top 10 prospect ranks. So let's break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. And listen, you're going on summer vacation. Matter of fact, anytime you go anywhere, you already know that you're going to purchase something. Ibotta is perfect because it's here to give you cash back on all of your purchases. Did you know that the average Ibotta user gets $256 per year? That could cover an entire shopping trip. You could go get some clothes if you want to. Go to the store, do what you need to. And you know what? You can save on over 2,400 brands at over 1,000 retailers, excuse me. You're talking about Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, all of that's different things. You got electronics, you got makeup, you got clothing, you got home improvement. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege. When you register, just go to the App Store or Google Play Store. Download the free Ibotta app and start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. I'll spell it out for you. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to go ahead and save that $5 today. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day for your second listen. Make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football. The season is here. There's no more tiptoeing around. The season is finally here, and I honestly and truly cannot wait. The only place I would point you to get prepared for it all is Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Now, if we're talking about prospects, which you know we love to do on this show, I like to give you something that I don't necessarily feel like you get elsewhere. I like to bring in experts. And every now and then, especially when a guy like Gerald, who y'all know I care about Gerald, that's my guy, right? Like I rock with Gerald for real. This is not no game. This is the time when I got to toot his horn for him, pause. These are the times I really got to talk the talk for him. Because Gerald comes on this show and he gives you a top 10 HBCU prospect list. And when you have a guy like Robert McDaniel at the top of the list, you may feel like, I don't know, especially when he's projecting, especially when he's saying, if you play him here, this is what I think he can be. This is scouting is so subjective, man. Scouting is so subjective. But when you're talking about projecting a player to a different position than you normally see him at, some people don't see the vision. Let me say that Robert McDaniel, the number one player on our top 10 HBCU prospect list, is also on the Senior Bowl watch list, along with 7 of his other counterparts on that same top 10 list. And I think one was snubbed. This is just me here to say, my guy Gerald knows what he's talking about. And he don't care, whatever, that's cool. But I'm going to sit here and tell you every single time. By the way, I told you privately, I'm going to say it publicly. Congratulations on the job at Morgan State. My guy is at his dream school now, right? So y'all show him some love. Coach_Huggins II on Twitter. Almost at the Instagram. That's Junior. Whatever, show him some love everywhere. But anyway, there's 11 HBCU players on this list. You have Jared Hunter, running back out of Howard. You have Kenny Gallup, defensive back out of Howard. You have Kendall Bowler, FAMU defensive back. Jeremiah Pruitt, FAMU tight end. Carson Vinson, you have Alabama A&M offensive lineman. James Burgess, Alabama State defensive back. Robert McDaniel, Jackson State defensive back. Eric Hunter, Morgan State linebacker. Elijah Williams, Morgan State defensive lineman. Now that I'm realizing this, I should have just grouped all of these by schools instead of saying one by one. But out of South Carolina State, you have offensive line Nick Taste, and then you also have Aaron Smith, linebacker from the same university. That's 11 players. That's 11 players. Williams, our number 2 player. McDaniel, our number 1 player. Hunter, our number 5 player. Burgess, our 6. Vincent, 10. Bowler, 3. Gallup, 8. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these players that are on this list that were also on our top 10 HBCU prospect list. So I'm just going to say that real quick. And matter of fact, Nick Taste was almost on this list, but he ended up at 11 because Jacoby Hewitt popped out of nowhere, and he said, I got to see this guy. I have to put him on the list. Man, like, come on, what we talking about? Like, let me flash it up here real quick. Y'all looking at 10 through 6 right now. So on there, you should see Vincent. You should see Burgess, right? You should see Gallup. Then you go here on the top of the list. 1, 2, and 3 are right there. McDaniel, Williams, Bowler. No, my bad. Bowler's 4. But still, you have Hunter at 5. And then you have the one guy who is not on the list, and that's Karon Prunty. And with Prunty not being on the list, I have to admit that I believe he is a snub. I have to admit that with Prunty not being on the list, I do think that's a mistake. This may be going out on a limb. This isn't about ranking prospects and any of that. If Karon Prunty has a really solid year, if Karon Prunty comes out and has a really good year, he may be the HBCU prospect I have the most confidence in getting drafted. And the reason I say that is the same reason I think he was snubbed from the Senior Bowl watch list. I believe, in my opinion, his time at Kansas should hold a lot of weight. One thing that we always say about our HBCU prospects is when they play Power 4 competition, you got to show up because that's when all of the eyes are out there on you. Well, Karon Prunty came from Kansas. It's not about playing Power 4 competition. He was the Power 4 competition, and he was really good when he was there. So we know what he looks like when he's going against a Texas, when he's going against an Oklahoma. We know what that looks like. I don't have to project it. It's there. So that's the reason I have a lot of confidence in Prunty. He just needs to validate it with a strong season in the CAA. He was an all first team Big South cornerback. I need him in 2024 to be an all CAA cornerback, first team. He was third team. I need him to be first team now. He does that. I think he's getting drafted, man. Like, I just think he checks a lot of the boxes that you want to be checked when you're talking about a cornerback coming from the FCS level, when you're talking about a cornerback coming from the HBCU level. And one thing that he has working in his favor is that he played at Kansas. And I'll say it to the what's it called? Till the cows come home. I think that's the cliche. I'll keep saying it because I do think that it matters. I do think that it's important. And it's something that we can't overstate. We can't overstate it. If that holds no weight, it's rigged. It's rigged to me, man. Um, But let's talk about two other players that we don't typically talk about, because the majority of this list is players that we have dove into before. Even Hunter, who's not on the list, is a player who we've spoken about because he's a preseason offensive player of the year. But Jeremiah Pruitt, tight end out of FAMU, this is probably the biggest projection on the list just because he wasn't a big part of the receiving core last year. He only had 202 yards, multiple games where singular catches. Like, I think that this year with Young and Dixon leaving, that he'll have to take a step up. He'll have to take a step into a bigger role. And being a tight end, being a player who's going to have a new quarterback, you could easily see those dump offs, try to get the easy reception, get some yak ability. And he had a long reception against Alabama State. Yeah, I think it was like nearly 70 yards against Alabama State, where you saw the physicality, you saw the athleticism with the ball in his hand. You get him a little short pass and let him keep running from there, I think he could be dangerous. And then you look at Aaron Smith. Aaron Smith is a linebacker out of South Carolina State who's not a tackling machine. That's typically what you see our linebackers praised for. Matter of fact, he's not even a coverage guy. He's only 218 as far as he's listed on the website, but he's not a big coverage guy. What he is a disruptor. That's what he should be known for. 11 tackles for a loss last year, 5 sacks, led the team in both. The year prior, 9 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks, second in TFLs, first in sacks on the team. He's a very disruptive player who you know is going to drive home to penetrate the offensive line. This is the type of player that you want. He's going to cause disruption over and over and over. Let him get double-digit tackles for a loss again. Maybe he ups the sack total again. Maybe he gets to 7 sacks. He gets to 7 sacks, 11, 12 tackles for a loss to combine with his 60 to 70 tackles. That's a strong year by Aaron Smith. That's a really strong year. And judging by his progression, that's definitely on the table. But now as you push forward, another thing on the table is a microscope. FAMU's under it. We looked at it segment 1. I haven't taken it off the table yet. It's still here. It's just time to put Dawson Odums under the microscope, because is there pressure on him? We definitely didn't talk like this a week ago, but I think it's necessary, and we'll do that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football. And hey, Locked On HBCU fans, I know you want to be a head coach. You want to have your I think it's called Dynasty. I'm not really a gamer. But on college football, you can have that moment here. And I want to take a moment to give you a heads up about the brand new mobile game, and I think you're going to love it as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's an amazing game and a simulation that you get to step into the shoes of a head coach. I don't know, maybe you want to be the head coach of Texas Southern. Who knows? Maybe you do. It's a beautiful graphic down there too, ain't it? But here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling all of the offensive plays during the game. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape your future and legacy as a program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free with no ads, 100% available offline. So if you're on a plane, go ahead and pop this thing out. Boop, 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 boop. Go ahead and do your thing. It's that simple. To download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up in the app stores. That's Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. The season, 2 times is how far? We 2 days away from the season now. Oh my gosh. Norfolk State, FAMU under the microscope. What can they be? All of the pressure in the world on them. Norfolk State under the microscope. Is Dawson Odums ever going to get it right? Matthew Sauls, the Virginian pilot reporter who's been breaking all of the news about Norfolk State and their coaching or their quarterback battle. He also went on HBCU Sports on their live stream. They had an interview up there. You should go check it out. It's going to be the one that says QB1, even though we're speaking about Dawson Odums. And he was asked if Odums was on the hot seat. Gotta say yeah. It's hard when you look at it. Now, if you remember a week and a half ago, I want to say it was about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. I'm talking about, is this the magic year for Dawson Odums? Is this the year in which he gets it right? I likened it to Trey Oliver. Big shoes. But Trey Oliver won his he won his Celebration Bowl in year 3. It was the third year with his inaugural recruiting class. For Odums, the way he came in, technically he went a year before he really got a recruiting class. 2022 was his real true first recruiting class. That was the comparison that I made. I don't know about you and who you interact with, but I don't think that there's a fan base less enthused about their season that I've interacted with than Norfolk State. This one's for you, Mason. I don't talk to Valley fans. I'm sure they're probably pretty unenthused about their season. This is one that was for you. I didn't want to do that, but you told me to do that. But at the same time, Norfolk State is a team that I'm talking about because they have a high-profile game on the way. When I tell you, anytime I try to speak some sort of positivity into Norfolk State, I have gotten at least one fan say, yo, cut that crap out. Let me tell you a story real quick. All right. So I announced this on yesterday's episode. I probably need to do it a little bit earlier. But all of our shows are live premieres, meaning anytime that the show first drops, you can come in and you can give your opinion on what's being said. We do them at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's when we do them, 7 o'clock in the morning. Still morning shows. The Friday and Monday will be evening shows. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 a.m. shows. If you wake up and you want to check it out first thing in the morning, you can do that. But here's something that's pretty cool about it is you can also view everything that's going to be talked about earlier. As soon as I set it up to premiere, you can go and you can look at the description and see what I'm talking about. I had a thumbnail on yesterday's episode that said Norfolk State, or that said under the radar with a picture of Norfolk State. I woke up in the morning before the show dropped. Somebody said we're under the radar because we suck. Somebody else said, nah, this ain't Dawson Odums' year. There is so much pessimism around this program. Dawson Odums has to be on the hot seat. And it's not just because, oh, people don't expect much from the team this year. There's a reason. It's not just because this thing exists. It's about the reason that this feeling exists. It's Dawson Odums going 6-5 in his first season, 2-3 in the MEAC. You're feeling kind of good. You have a winning record, 6-5. Okay, good. But then the next year you go 2-9, 2-3 in the MEAC season again. You go 3-8, 1-4 in MEAC play. You haven't had any success. You win your first 3 home games. You've lost your last 10. Can the fans be witness to a victory at home? There's certain things like if Dawson Odums isn't on the hot seat and he wants to keep his seat from being hot, blistering, right? Because I think next year is the last year of his contract. But if Dawson Odums wants to cool off what is probably already a hot seat, then he needs to give the fans a reason to believe. The fans aren't going to get you fired, but the reasons the fans have no belief is a reason to get you fired. It's because you're not winning any games at home. It's because you're not winning many games, period. You won 5 games over the last 2 years, despite the fact that you won 6 your first season. So you won 6 your first season and you struggled to, not even struggled, you have failed to reach that same bar with 2 years combined over the next 2 seasons. These are bad looks. I think you need to have a winning record in the MEAC. You have a winning record in the MEAC, you might be a 4 seed. You might find yourself in 4th place. You find yourself top 4. Maybe the fans are cool. You win some home games. Give me a homecoming victory, please. Maybe you'll be all right. But you got to win some games in the state of Virginia. They was killing them after he lost to Virginia State. It was killing them after that. This is just a tough one. But in my opinion, that's what's necessary. If he wants to get off of the hot seat, he needs to have a winning record in MEAC play and win some stinking games at home. Let the fans have something to be excited about. Once again, the fans are not going to get you fired. But the reason the fans are unruly, the reason that fans are upset, it's not only the fans that are upset about those reasons, and the other people who are upset can get you fired. It's just that simple. Dawson Odums may or may not be on the hot seat, but there goes the way to do it. New offensive coordinator Jason Phillips was also highlighted by Michael Sauls as somebody who they need to have some consistency at the offensive coordinator position. They've been switching over and over and over. The thing is, if you don't win any games, you may not be running the staff to have consistency from the next year to the next year to the next year. You got to win now. Jason Phillips has to get it together now. Dawson Odums in that defense got to get it together. Everything. You have to be on point in 2024 now. On tomorrow's episode, we get to finally do our game of the week. I'm excited. Not going to lie to y'all. I'm excited. 3 storylines. No, 3 matchups, 2 storylines, and 1 key to victory for each team. Clearly, I'm a little bit rusty, but tomorrow I'll get all the grease out. We're going to wipe it down. We're going to be ready to get this show on the road. Now, until tomorrow's episode, next time we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.